Good evening, and welcome to the April 30th Committee of the Whole meeting of the Board of Education. Thank you for coming. We have a few folks in the audience tonight. For those of you who are in the audience, if you want to follow along, we have agendas outside the door to the right, and I already have one blue slip, but if anybody wants to address the board, you can fill one of those out and hand it in to us. For those of you who are watching at home, you can go to our website, which is livoniapublicschools.org. Hover over the board tab, and you'll see a drop down for the agendas, and you can follow along with us. If you've tuned in to watch discussion, this is the meeting that you'll see it. Most of the items that are coming before the board tonight have already been presented to us once at our study session, and tonight is when we get into the nitty-gritty, and we sort of tear things apart and ask questions, and it'll go from here on to our regular meeting on May 7th. Am I right on that?
You are. Correct.
For our regular meeting. So you've come to the right place if you want to hear the discussion. So we'll get into it pretty soon. And we'll go right to our first item, which is audience communication. And as indicated, I do have a blue slip from Jennifer Hardy Francis. Gee, you don't know Mr. Francis, do you?
Yes, I do.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Just a handout coming around your way. There should be enough. No? Sir, we can. There's another.
We've got
We'll make a
enough.
copy.
We've got enough.
Yeah,
We
we
got
can
it.
share.
Here you go.
Oh, thank
I
you.
got extras. I'm prepared.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Do I have to state my name or anything, or you already did that for me?
You're already on here? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, hello, Superintendent Oquist and Livonia Public School Board members. My name is Jennifer Hardy Francis, and I am the media specialist at Churchill High School. Governor Snyder recently proclaimed that April 2018 would be School Library Month in the state of Michigan. The library and media specialists in LPS have come here tonight to thank the members of the school board and the administration of the Livonia Public Schools for maintaining a strong commitment to the school libraries in our district. In Livonia Public Schools, 20 certified library and media specialists teach our students research skills stemming from a strong curriculum designed to build a 21st century mass of learners. Students at all levels learn how to use a library, which offers for many of our students the only source of freely available books that they have access to, as well as educational opportunities that reach beyond our buildings. A love of reading is also strongly encouraged, such reading experiences build a foundation for all learning and a foundation for empathy and personal growth. In addition, students are taught important information literacy skills, helping them to become discerning consumers of information and develop into respectful digital citizens. Media specialists are a strong group of leaders in our district who provide professional development and assist teachers by improving learning for their students on a daily basis. It's a feather in your cap to have maintained such a strong library program in the face of difficult economic times. The community has benefited from your wisdom, and we want to make sure that everyone realizes exactly how significant this is. Neighboring school districts have been forced to make severe cuts to their library programs. Students and staff in those districts have suffered. Looking ahead to the recent Michigan state law regarding third grade reading proficiency, we stand poised to help students achieve proficiency as directed by the Michigan Department of Education. The Livonia Public Schools and the Livonia community should be extremely proud to have certified media specialists who each hold valid teaching certificates from the state of Michigan, as well as master's degrees in library and information science. Thank you, Livonia Public Schools, for supporting the library program. Your decisions have enriched our community and made Livonia a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Okay, that was the only blue slip I have. Now, you can choose to stay and watch the rest of our meeting, or do whatever you have planned for your Monday night. All right, so we'll move on then to item 2, Committee of the Whole. I don't have anything. Do you have anything, new, Mrs. Oaquist?
I do not.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Brian.
good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
The other Francis talks.
All right, so then we'll go to item 3, Building and Site. Mr. Centers.
All right. Item A is boiler replacements. Mr. Francis.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm going to have the boiler replacements broken into 2 sections. We're doing pool boilers and frost boilers. So we're going to take first the pool boilers, and I have, as I had mentioned in my memo from last week, these were opened and tallied and reviewed during the week last week. So I actually have the information for you.
Wonderful.
So, yep. Take some of those. Thank you. And it's a double-sided sheet. The front side is the memo from Mr. Harry Lau, the Administrative Facilities and Operations, and the back side is the bid tab itself.
So these are the high school
This,
boilers for the pool.
yes, so this is Stevenson and Franklin High School's pools, and we are looking to more recently Churchill's was done, and this is the same setup and system that Churchill has received. So we had bid the same specifications for Franklin and for Stevenson. And Goyette Mechanical out of Flint, Michigan was the low responsive bidder at $109,900. That is both schools, the entirety of the project from beginning to end. So that's basically, if you want to think about it, a 50-50 on each. So the recommendation is going to be for Goyette out of Flint as the low bidder. If you see the backside, you can see the all three bids that had come in, significantly less through Goyette. So that is the recommendation. And you'll see on the next one that we have a familiar bidder from this one that also, some of these had bid on the frost boiler as well. So, but I just wanted to point out this particular bid tabulation. So,
And this work would be done this summer?
yes, this would be done in preparation for the school year. Yeah. So when we have this out, we would, we would ask to bring this to the next voting meeting of the board, and if the board does vote in a positive manner on this project, and this is a sinking fund project that we would proceed with, then we would move forward in setting up the work to be done. Tomorrow being May 1st, we'll have it done at the convenience of for the school to not have to be down at all, and then it'll be ready to go for the use.
Mr. Johnson.
A couple of questions, Phil. Yeah, you say that they're at the end of their life cycle now. Do you know what the typical life cycle is?
I can't tell you when we put them in, and I should have gotten that information before I came, but I'll get on that and get you what we have. I did speak to one of our HVAC guys last week probably I think Wednesday or Thursday, and we were talking about it, and he was very excited because he knew that he had spec'd this system. He likes what it was spec'd out at Churchill, and it's time for them. But as far as the number that we have or where we're at, I'll get you that this week. Okay.
Yeah, once they start the work, any idea how long it takes to replace it?
It shouldn't be more than, I'll double check and confirm what the plan is, but it's not a large boiler system. It's not the same as in like what we're going to be doing frost. Even the frost boiler, based upon, and we'll get to that, it only takes a few weeks because of the change in that plan. So this shouldn't be a very long system, but I will get you answers to both those. I apologize for not having that for you tonight.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
If I'd have known I was going to ask those questions, I would have asked them earlier. In looking at the bids, it looks like Goyette bid the whole project and the other two per boiler. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah.
Oh, you're on the backside. Okay. And they did it for whatever reason as 50-50, because you can see they're exactly split
Right.
the same amount because it's the same specs and the same scope. You are reading it correctly.
Okay.
They bid the entire project because it was actually bid as as one project. We weren't intending to split the two schools up. So, for whatever reason, they did voluntarily give two individual numbers, maybe on the outside chance for some reason that somebody else did one really high and did one really low for whatever reason. You'll see in the Frost, we had a voluntary bid on something in the Frost one too. I mean, sometimes contractors just decide to, and they can do some voluntary things in their bid. This fulfills the requirements because you can double them and total out, but we didn't require them to split them individually. We had spec'd it as a single job, so to speak.
That's all I have, Mr. Sanders, thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Frank?
Just the scope of this, I know we talked about several times that we weren't going to take any additional work on this summer. These are things that can't wait, they're smaller items.
Yes, they're not, this isn't a very big project.
Okay.
Mhm,
Okay.
correct. And something we've been looking at for a few months now, but wanting to get through the use of the high school pools.
Okay.
Let me also mention, Mrs. Frank, that this would be something that our own internal folks can monitor and manage. This is not something we would be having AUK or a construction
Right.
manager
Okay.
monitor for us. So
Okay.
we were really between what we were asking Plattmer and Cressa to do and our construction managers to monitor for those projects. So you're
Yes.
correctly thinking whether it's the roofs or the athletic
Right.
fields, et cetera. This is what we would call an internal project, the
Okay.
type of more typical summer maintenance. And so, for instance, Harry, Wayne, our own electricians, those types of folks would be in and monitoring some of this
Okay.
work. So we wouldn't need to rely on our CMs to do that.
Okay, perfect,
Yes.
sounds good. Okay,
Very,
thank you.
very good point.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anything else? Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Are we going to realize any energy savings from this? Are you aware?
Based upon the newer system, it would be more efficient as well as not maintenance-wise. We're having to maintain and fix what's currently there. So from those two aspects, the answer would be yes.
Great. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it warming the area or warming the water?
The water. It's just because of the size, it's a different system than you would put, like, you have a heater for your home pool.
Right.
Which is usually a gas, natural gas fired. And it's smaller because of the gallons you have at home.
Yes.
This is a much
Okay.
larger boiler that would be heating the. I passed out another memo from Mr. Lau with the bid tabulation on the backside. This is specifically for Frost. We've spoken about Frost on several occasions, and you all may recall that this fall, Frost Middle School, we had done the boiler pilot at Frost, whereas we removed a couple of the Lochinvar boilers, the older, larger traditional ones, in lieu of some more energy-efficient Hamilton boilers. We are currently, or this past winter, we ran it with 3 of them and kept a couple of the traditionals as backups. After looking at the data, it took some tweaks through the season. We did some work throughout, and we also had a kind of an odd winter where we were having warm days when we shouldn't and cold days when we shouldn't on the calendar. But when it was all said and done, we had met several times. At first, there was some discussion of saying, okay, we're satisfied, let's now do 4 or 5 more buildings with these new boilers. We thought about that, had longer discussion, and decided, let's do another season, continue the quote-unquote pilot at Frost, and go fully with the Hamiltons. So we're gonna disengage from the Lochinvars, put the 4th Hamilton boiler in at Frost, and fully run another season under the conditions that we now have a better grasp on, as far as just some of the tweaks to the new boiler itself. So we're going to go into the winter 18-19 fully functioning at Frost. We'll then capture that data. We're fairly confident that we're going to get what we think we're going to get, but instead of expanding it too quickly, we wanted to make sure to just sort of slow down, make sure we have one building fully functioning, and have 2 seasons of data on it, so that we can then bring back to you next year if we find that is our recommendation to move forward. So what we have here is the demolition and then the addition of that Hamilton boiler that we spec'd at Frost, I'd like to point out that you can see we had 4 responses. One of them was for demo only, and that's what I was referring to before. I'm uncertain of why they decided, but a company decided that they would just throw their hat in the ring of demo only on the project. Clearly, the other 3 companies were also including demo, but also the installation of the new boiler. So you will note that for $2,500 more, they are not the lowest pure dollar amount, but we are recommending Contrast Mechanical out of Macomb Township. The reason for that is the numbers are relatively very close. Contrast did Frost last fall. They've been in that boiler room. They know the plant. They know the job. That's not to take anything away from Goya. Obviously, we're recommending them for the pool boilers. It's just the idea of let's let Contrast finish what they've already started in that room. It makes some sense to us. It wouldn't be another company looking at the first company's work and then adding on the 4th of 4 boilers. So we feel more comfortable with this. That's why, for again, the $2,500, we're recommending to go with Contrast to finish the job, if you will.
And I'm assuming that we're fully satisfied with
We-
their work.
Yes,
to
as
date.
far as as far as the demo and installation that they had done previously, we were, which is, again, why we're recommending this. So, do you have any questions?
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Mr. Francis, can you just explain the note and the net total down there for Detroit Boiler?
The Lochinvar
Where it
13403?
says minus, yeah.
Yes. I'll have to take a note on that one, because that actually was added by Mr. Lau, that note at the bottom. So
Okay.
I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'm wondering if it's not, that if they used Lochinvar instead of the Hamilton,
Right,
they would subtract the amount.
right. You know what? That is very likely it. Unfortunately, I didn't see Mr. Lau today. I
No,
got
that's
electronically, and we didn't have a chance to get together,
If you can just
so.
volunteer.
But I will double check on that.
Yes, if you can just do that, that would be awesome.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely. But we expect specifically that Hamilton.
Yep.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, anything else, Mr. Francis?
Not on this. I request for regular meeting.
Are we just gonna do this on one motion?
I was going to, but I can do it however you'd like. It'd be similar to, you want to do two separate?
We're doing
Okay.
two
Companies,
motions?
Okay.
Okay.
2 bids.
Okay.
Moving on to item B, purchase amendments for Perrinville and Aiken Mills, also Western Wade Skills Center.
I'd like to go through, and all of you do have a copy that I had highlighted some of the points on them. I'd like to start off, if you don't mind, with the Nankin/Skill Center property. It's the First Amendment to offer to purchase real estate. Some of the high points, first of all, just for the community, if you haven't been following the other meetings, et cetera, just for the record, this is an amendment to the offer to purchase with Infinity Homes with regard to the Nankin and Skill Center property. What the main reason for the amendment is we found, actually, during the process of due diligence, that there is a strip of 20 feet that is located joining the Skill Center property to Terry Street between 2 homes, and it's basically an asphalt pathway that was used as a walkway between the street or the sidewalk and the property. It didn't turn up on the title search or the earlier survey work because it actually has its own CIDWL number. A CIDWL number is the same as a tax ID number. It wasn't realized until actually utilities came in to start looking for the Infinity to look at the underground. They said this property right here is its own piece of property, And when the purchaser realized that, then they contacted us. We did some due diligence as well and found that it's actually Livonia Public Schools property. It in fact still is stated under the name of Nankin Schools. So that is Livonia Public Schools property. So what we decided was it's not a large parcel. It actually comes out to be less than 5/100ths of an acre when you do the math on it. It's 50 by 102. It's literally a strip, and its legal description is actually the house to the south of it. That legal description matches this legal description because it says that it's the northern portion of that lot, the 20 feet. So it actually excludes that 20 feet from the other lot. Municipalities years ago end up doing some odd things sometimes, but it's its own independent strip of again, 102 by 20, and it is owned by Livonia Public Schools. So we are adding it into, we had no reason to try to charge them more or do anything. We always assumed this would have been part of the original parcel of land, and really in net acreage is fractional at best. Again, less than 5/100ths of an acre. So what we're doing with the amendment, and where I did highlight in areas, you see a lot of the highlights simply say, and the 20-foot strip, and the 20-foot strip, and it has sometimes its actual Sidwell number in there. So as you go through, you see those pieces. What I want to point out is, on the first page, you can see that both of those are about the 20-foot strip. And we are not changing, on the second page, page 2, where I highlighted, we're not changing the purchase price. It's neither increased nor reduced because of it's a minimal amount. It's something that, again, we all believed it was part of to begin with. Now, another item that is included in here as an addendum is the land contract. As you know, we went into the sale of these properties as 2 independent Sidwell numbers. A few years ago, Nankin and Skill were 1 Sidwell number. They were split because the district had sold, but then it fell through the Nankin side. So it becomes 2 separate parcels. And at that time, the building was taken down, so the side that was Nankin is completely cleared and ready to go. The structure still remains the Skill Center, and we're working on a plan for raising that building. So in lieu of just waiting until 100% of the land is done, this land contract has shown the plan to get half of the funds at closing in June from the purchaser, and they have to maintain the half that they take, which is Nankin, and they cannot, without our permission, do anything on the other portion, which is the Skill Center. So to that end, it gets us half the funds, it gets them, and I say half, it's not literally 50%, but it gets them half the property. They can begin any of their work that they'd like on that Nankin site, and then when we have the other portion of it completely ready to go, so the building's taken down, they have the opportunity to do their due diligence again afterwards, et cetera, then we can close and get the other half of the money, and in totality, the property is theirs. So that's the land contract as an addendum to this First Amendment as well. So the 2 biggest pieces that we're talking about here are the 20-foot strip and the land contract. And that's essentially how the land contract is going to work. So we would be looking to, and if you see on page 2, I highlighted that whole paragraph, number 2, terms of payment. It explains that through a portion of their good faith money plus the additional that they would pay, they would be paying LPS half of $575,000 of the amount of the total purchase. Get that portion, and then we would later, by end of January, close on the other portion, in totality be closed on that property.
So that is not new, just to clarify for anyone listening, or for the, and I know you know that as the board, that was the agreement that we made when we sold the property, that we were going to sell this on land contract two separate portions of the property so that they could get started, since we were still utilizing the skill center this first semester and then planning to demolish it over the summer months. So that is not new. The only thing that's new information, which isn't new because we talked to you about it at the study session, is that one sidewalk path area that we're allowing them to put that Sidwell number under their property purchase as well.
So there's a lot of sheets there, but there's not a lot that's new about it. But it's been a little while since we talked about it, so I wanted to make sure that we talked through the two major pieces that were there, both the addendum with the 20 feet and the land contract.
Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Francis, I know that's a relatively small strip of land, and it connects the street with the property. Do we have any idea what Infinity is going to end up doing with that?
Well, not specifically, other than they apparently need it for the utilities, which is how they discovered it to begin with, but that would all be underground. I don't have an answer for it, but there's not much you can do with it other than have it be, I mean, you can't build there, it's only 20 feet. I mean, that's the width of, that's the width of a lane in a parking lot, I mean, so to speak. It's really still likely going to be a path, but
That's what I'm thinking.
there's an asphalt on it right now, and
It's a natural
Cut through.
entryway to the new subdivision.
Right.
If they want to keep going, the only thing I'm thinking is it's going to take a little bit, if you continue it out into the new cul-de-sac there, it's going to take some away from probably two lots, maybe one lot, that back up to that spot. So I don't know if they're going to
Yeah.
use it to come all the way through or just use it for.
They didn't
right now-
talk about any
no.
development of it. I think it really was for utility
yeah,
access.
Just
they
utilities.
just seem to,
Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to have access because it wasn't deeded to them.
right.
So
They
they
were
might just
basically
leave
saying, we
it.
just need this for more of the legal purposes of following
Yeah,
through.
there.
And if you recall, it's really just the path that if you walked through that path on that 20-foot strip, it connects to the walking path that's behind the
Right,
skill
okay,
center.
right.
It's all one big asphalt path.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mrs. Burke?
Just a comment, we also don't want to continue to own one tiny little rectangle in the middle of two subdivisions that are then
Yeah.
connected back to
It
area.
would not be recommended then, because we'd have to,
Clean or maintain.
Yes,
No,
we'd have to
then
maintain it,
have liability
fix,
over and anything.
and mow and all those other
Yeah.
things.
Much cleaner to
Curly
have
or
that deed.
shampoo.
So it's in everyone's interest to have
Yes.
done this. Yes. Any other questions? So, Mrs. Oquist has, based upon the original vote of the board, has the authority to sign this document for the board. That was the original, well, I'm blanking, not caption, but motion, I'm sorry, that was the original motion on that, just to remind everybody. So it doesn't have to go on the vote. The second one is for Perrinville. We have another First Amendment to offer to purchase real estate. It also has a land contract inside as an addendum. So in order to go over this land contract is new based upon the original offer to purchase, as is the purchase price. I want to go into a few details, mostly for the public, because I think we've spoken about it at the study session. But the parcel on Ann Arbor Trail and Hines Drive and Farmington Road, that is Perrinville, it has been found after some engineering and some site planning work and some work with the city of Westland by the purchaser to be a more difficult build, and it has some hurdles to get over. They originally had planned basements with the high water table. They can't do basements. They're going to have to do a slab. They had planned a certain ingress, egress onto that property off of Hines and the other roads. They can't do those based upon the city of Westland and what they've been allowed or not allowed to do at the city of Westland. So they had to re-engineer how they actually set up their housing structures, because their original plan is no longer going to work based upon how they had thought about it. So they've got some concerns on there with regard to, in fact, competing with themselves because they're going to now start building over at the Nankin Center. So they had stated that they were concerned about their original $325,000 price because they're not going to be able to build the same number of properties on that parcel, and they're going to be, what they are going to build not only will be less in number, but their price point would very likely have to come down because of not having a dug basement and things like that, and losing storage, et cetera. So they had determined that a lower price was required for them to purchase it. We, after doing some of our own research and checking with our attorney and checking with our consultant, had decided that even going back out, these aren't things that were only unique because this developer was trying to build on it. There's going to be a high water table whether it's this developer or another developer. The city of Westland is going to have the same requirements for ingress, egress for this developer or for other developers. These were natural concerns on the parcel. So instead of going through the process of saying, well, we'll just find somebody else, you have the same concerns. We've already got a developer who's willing to work with this. They just have to put more thought into the engineering of it. So the discussion that we came up with was a price point that came down from $325,000 to $200,000. And we also were going to do a land contract on this parcel so that we could get it off of our maintenance. So part of this that I highlighted for you shows that once we close on this, which after agreeing to this amendment, we would close within 30 days. We would no longer have to send our teams and crews out there to maintain and mow. They would be required to maintain the property, but they're not allowed to build on the property, remove things other than obviously grass clippings on that property without our permission until they actually close. And in the terms of it, they have up to 3 years to close and give us the remainder of the money. So they would be giving us $40,000 at closing and have up to 3 years to pay the remainder. So essentially, they would take over the maintenance and the concern of it. They just can't do anything to it until they close completely and give us the remainder of the money on the land contract. So, yes.
So just as a reminder, when we talked about this in study session, it wasn't last week, it was the month prior when we brought to you this initial question of, do we want to continue to move forward with this purchaser, with the adjustment of the purchase price based on the challenges of engineering this property, or did we want to start the process over again and re-engage Bill Bowman and go back out using his consulting company to remarket this property? One of the key factors, I think, for the board at that time, and also part of our deliberations, was we only had one developer bid on this property, and that was this developer. We did not have, unlike the other properties where we had multiple bidders, where we could have potentially gone back and went to the second bidder, third bidder, went back out to rebid. We only had one developer interested in this property. And again, as a board, your initial guidance to us was to look at home developments or residential developments for these properties. One, it's a positive benefit to our community to add some housing developments, and two, we certainly hope it's a benefit for the district ultimately, where we may be able to, one, either provide housing opportunities for families to move in, or housing opportunities for current families within Lavonia to maybe move to either a newer home or downsize or upsize, et cetera, that might free up another property. So certainly going with a home developer was the ideal direction for this property and our others, and this was the only developer at that time. So just as a reminder, because that wasn't our last study session, it was the one prior, some of our dialogue surrounding that was a portion of our decision. The other piece was, you'll see that on the first page of the amendment, which is very important. It's the first highlighted section. Whereas in consideration for seller agreeing to reduce purchase price relative to the premises, purchaser acknowledges that it shall not ask for a price reduction from seller on either of the other two properties it currently has under contract. That is both Clay and Nankin. So as you recall, this developer was successful in obtaining the highest bid for all three properties. And so in deference to making this adjustment, there would be no price adjustments the other two properties. A request for reduction from the purchaser on the other two properties. So that's an important element that we wanted to be sure was noted for you in this amendment.
That and I want to point out the second piece because there's no reference point on the second piece. If you're wondering what paragraph 10F to the Clay offer and paragraph 10E to the Nankin offer is, that's essentially, if you recall, we wrote into both of the other offers because we had one home developer that had the high bid on all three properties. But as Mrs. Oquist is mentioning, they were the only bidder on this Perrinville property. We tie-barred the closing of Perrinville the closing of Clay and Nankin Skill on the closing of Perrinville. So those two paragraphs reference that point. So what we're basically saying is they conceded in the first section that Mrs. Oquist had mentioned to saying they won't reduce their asking price on either of those others. And the second one, we're saying we'll basically disregard those. And the reason we would disregard them is the purchaser's already signed and agreed to this. All we have to do is sign it, and then they're bound to close within 30 days. So we know that they're going to close under this contract, so that they've essentially fulfilled that promise. So we can now say we're not worried about that section. So it's sort of a double win. Yeah.
Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you. Is it the developer who comes back with the price that he wants? Is that he comes and says, I want a reduction of so much? Like, what determined the amount of reduction to 200,000?
It was a negotiation.
Okay. And if we were to open bid up again, most likely we would not be able to get the original price that we asked for that property. Most likely we would get the amount that this seller or developer is proposing. Is that?
They actually proposed a significantly lower number than the number that we agreed upon.
Okay.
And so as we consulted back with our real estate consultant, based on the feedback with regard to the engineering of the property and the approvals that would come from the city, and also knowing that at that time they were the only bidder on that property. The combination of those factors, at that time, the direction of the board was that we could go back and negotiate from that original offer that was made, and so that we ended up with the 200,000.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mrs. Bonfield.
I'm going to say that I agree with moving forward with this. I think the chances of us getting more money and enough to offset any of our additional costs by taking it back out to market and possibly not being able to sell it at all because of the restrictions on it. I think that this is a good plan for us. And Mr. Francis, could you just remind us because sometimes we get confused on what Perrinville property, because there's two that we refer to. So if you could just remind us what that property is.
This is located at Hines, Ann Arbor Trail, and Farmington Road. This is the original Perrinville school that was, the structure itself was moved a couple of years ago over to Greenmead by the city.
Okay, so it's that little weird island.
Very unique.
Yes, I call it Perrinville Island, but
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your input.
Anything else? Mrs. Frank.
Okay, because I'm not an attorney, can you just give me the skinny on this? So they get,
Can you tell me which page you're on?
I don't know which page I'm on. Can you just tell me? So whenever I don't know where it is in here. So just because they wanted to untie the other purchases, just gives me a little bit of pause. How much money will we get from them when they close? Right? Because it's a land
Perrinville?
contract.
So on the Perrinville closing,
Yes,
we're going to have $40,000 of the 200. Okay.
in the next 30 days, or whenever we.
Yes, and we're technically in 30 days from the signature in our agreement to this document, because again, they've already agreed to it.
Right.
And signed it. We just need to sign it. 30 days triggers from the last signature.
Okay.
So basically, in May, we will close.
Okay.
We have $25,000 of their money already because of the earnest money.
Okay.
They would owe us 15 more. They would round us off to 40. then the other,
Oh, not an additional 40, 15.
right, we
Okay.
would have 40 of the 200. They
Okay.
would pay the additional 160, and they have to do that within 3 years.
Or whenever they're ready to start
Yeah, yes,
developing.
within
Okay.
that. So if it happens 30 days after that, that's one thing. If it happens up to 3 years, it's somewhere within that time frame.
Okay.
And again, they are responsible then for the maintenance of that property
Okay.
once we close in May.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Do we have any concerns, once we sign that property over to them, that, about the maintenance on the property and upkeep? Because a lot of people are going to assume until the point where, buildings and they start putting their signs up, many people are going to assume that's still LPS property.
I'm very comfortable with it for a couple of reasons. One, legally, we have the documentation that states that it is their responsibility. But two, we're talking about an organization that is in Livonia and in Westland currently, and we know that they're going to remain here for quite some time because they're currently building at the old Washington site. They want to be building right down Ann Arbor Trail from this site. They're going to be developing at the Clay property at 6 and Newbury. So we know that they're going to be around. We have communication ties open with them currently, and we can continue those ties. I'm very comfortable with the idea because it's something that they understand and agreed to on this parcel. It's not it's 5 acres. They can handle it pretty quickly. And if we found that there was some negligence on it, I mean, I've got their phone numbers and emails, and they're local Lavonia people. We can have a conversation.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Frank.
Just one more attorney question.
Oh, sorry.
No. On a land contract, they can cancel the contract up until the 3rd year, is that correct? So if they decide not to purchase, I mean, what is the benefit of doing a land contract? Because they kind of have 3 years to decide, or?
They would be in default. They owe us that money within that time period. They would be in default if they didn't pay it.
Okay.
But essentially, they are closing on it, and a land contract is the promissory to pay that amount.
Okay.
They have agreed to it contractually. Do you have anything you wanted to?
No, you've hit it right on the
Okay.
head, Mr. Francis.
Okay. So you can't just say a year into it, I don't want to do it anymore.
They
You
could,
could,
but
but
then
you-
they would lose all the
Yeah.
money
They
that they
still
got
Have to
into
pay
it.
them.
They would lose the 40,000.
But just the 40,000.
And
It can get a little more complicated than
you could
that.
take them to court, et cetera. They've also got money into it more than that because they've done repeated engineering
Right.
on it. They've got their people and companies that they've contracted with
Right.
to help do some of that work that they've been paying on it. They've got investment into this property as they do the other properties, just as much as we do. They have attorney fees on them as well, et cetera. So they're, yeah.
Okay.
Anything
Thank
else?
you.
Okay, that ends item B.
We gonna-
And thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. I'll see you
We're going
guys
to
in a
take
little
that to
bit.
the voting meeting?
No, this
No,
is
these
similar
are the same.
to,
These
again,
amendments
Mrs.
can sign.
Oakwith can sign for that. And I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Thank you.
The next item will be presented by Mr. Willenborg. It's the purchase of flexible furniture for Emerson Middle School and the Lavonia Career Technical Center.
Mr. Willenberg, you always have fun pictures for us.
Yes.
These are fun things.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Thank you, President Johnson. Yes, my topic might not be quite as complex as the previous topic, certainly more colorful. Yes, we're
Prettier.
talking about the flexible furniture plans. And I remember over the last several months, we talked about a plan at Franklin. Thank you for your support. They're excited to get to order their new furniture. Tonight, I'm here to speak to you about 2 more plans, 2 of 7 plans, as we hope that we plan to touch all of our secondary schools, including the Career Center, for, like I said, 7 total plans. Tonight, we cover plans 2 and 3, which are from Emerson Middle School and from the Lavonia Career Technical Center. So again, I'm requesting a review and your support to purchase the flexible furniture plans at Emerson and at the Career Center. This is a follow-up item from the study session of April 23rd. And it's a refresher, and as a refresher, it's a Phase 3 item from the secondary furniture replacement budget of the bond funds of 2013. Each middle school was afforded $40,000, high school $75,000, and the autonomy to develop with their staff and students a plan of furniture replacement that would establish dynamic and contemporary and collaborative learning areas. The Career Center was afforded $15,000. So I'll start tonight with the Emerson Plan, the colorful picture that says Emerson Plan in the front, and you get a feel for that plan. Their plan is to redesign and recreate customizable learning spaces in their library media center. And the plan calls for all types of seating, sectional tables and chairs, bench-type seating, halfbacks, seating with square tables, bar height tables with stools, and rolling whiteboard sectionals or dividers. Their plan also calls for standing student desks and a variety of other alternative seating, such as you see on I think it's page 5 there, ball chairs and stool seats that can be added to classrooms on a checkout basis from the LMC. Now, the Emerson staff has consulted with Interior Environments, and their partial invoice totals $33,418, and that's in your packet. The rest of their invoice had to be put on hold, and I should have it by next week, but there was a discontinuation of some of the chairs in their original thought, so I'm going to have another invoice, which, together with the $33,418 and this checkout furniture, it'll be real close to $40,000. Now, I have an exact figure for you next week. The Career Center plan is to enhance their student lounge area where those vending machines are, with sectional seating, contemporary chairs, and there's another packet that shows some of the examples there, and bar height tables with stools. Currently, they have those 1969 wooden benches against the walls that they're really anxious to have replaced. So they're going to redo, upgrade that student lounge area. Their plan also calls for a small presentation room, conference table, 8-foot conference table with 8 conference chairs, fixed arm chairs that, like I said, will serve as a small presentation room for different small groups. The Career Center staff is consulted also with Interior Environments, and their invoice totals $14,912, and you should have a copy of that in your packet. Just as a reference, there's 2 conference and chairs pictures there. They're ordering the chairs on page 3 and the table on page 4. So apologize for that confusion, but they're excited, and I ask for your continuing consideration and support for the purchase of the Emerson Flexible Furniture Plan and the Career Center Flexible Furniture Plan.
Any questions? Mrs. Burton?
Again, Dan, Mr. Willenborg, could you remind me again the area that they're reconfiguring in Emerson?
Emerson is in the LMC. So
Okay, so it's a portion of the LMC.
It's a portion of the LMC.
Okay. And then
yes.
the remainder is going to stay as it is right now?
Yes, they're
Okay.
redesigning, recreating that space.
Okay, great.
So some
Who
of
would be
the,
able to use that space?
pardon?
Everyone
I can-
would be able to use that.
Everyone will be able to use that space, yes.
Okay.
I mean, teachers will bring classes down, students could be there at their appropriate times, but it's accessible to everybody.
Okay.
It includes everybody.
And I love LMCs going to more of this kind of a format. It's just so much more welcoming for students.
Sure.
More of a lounge type area. It's reminiscent to me of student centers in college
Sure.
lounge areas, which is just so much more welcoming.
I agree, like the union buildings at colleges.
Exactly.
It's comfortable,
Yep.
they feel like they own it, it's
Yep.
theirs,
Absolutely.
and it can be redesigned, reconfigured, if you will.
Sounds great. Thank you.
The Career Center did quite a bit with a small
They did.
portion of money, didn't they?
They're excited with their different style of chairs, and, you know, some of them, as you see, don't have legs, but they're comfortable. I mean, I think the students will really like them. They've tested them.
What is this? Do we know what?
That's I think they call it an echo chair, but you sit on it.
We thought it was an end table.
This is?
Or is it,
This thing?
Yeah.
It's got like a silver dot. What's this silver? Do you know what
Like
this
these
is?
on
Is
the
that a
front?
stool?
Is that a speaker? Oh, yes,
I think
No.
it's a
That's exactly
stool
what
you would
they are.
sit
And
on.
the stools can often fit together, and it's almost, you can almost make it like a little,
Like a
ottoman
Lego.
seating area.
Uh-huh.
Or
got
It
it.
is a
like a
seat.
backless chair.
Yeah, it's a seat. You would sit on
so
it.
you push them together,
I like the little whiteboard. I think those are super fun. I'd be like all over that. Very nice.
Well, even as
Creative.
dividers too. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
whiteboard
Divides
or
areas.
dividers, yeah.
Yeah.
Great for just some turn and talk,
Yes.
small group collaboration,
Yes.
some
Yes.
ideas, let's jot it down, what are you
Yeah.
thinking? You can share it, but yet it's also somewhat contained for that group.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then certainly it's something that, the teacher could pull out and share it with everyone, and then have them work back. It really is so interesting to see the flavors of the spaces
Yes.
that the schools are trying to create
Right.
with a relatively, even though in total it's a good sum of money, but it really, you do see some real creativity coming out of a relatively small individual school sums of money to be able to provide some of these more flexible and collaborative learning areas for our students. So,
and they've tried to set aside some optional alternative desks, if you will, that teach, if they know they have a student in class who prefer a standing desk, that they can come to the LMC, check it out, it'll be barcoded, and they'll put it in their room for that student.
Nice.
So that's, part of their plan as well.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. Can you explain to the viewers, again, why the discrepancy that the middle schools are getting the $40,000 allotment and the LCTC is getting the $15,000?
Well, it's primarily based on the size of the building
Okay,
and the number of students, and what we felt was a fair and equitable
okay,
way to distribute those funds.
perfect.
It
Thank you.
amounts to $360,000. It's the last of essentially $2 million that have been put into the high school's furniture replacement plan. You know,
the LCTC added costs too.
and at the LCTC, they have a lot of extra funds available
Oh, yes.
through the added cost
Okay,
that they can refurbish some things.
thank you, thank you.
So is this the
Okay.
is this the or not the conference room, but you said the vending area right outside of the community room, or there's a bigger vending area
There's a
somewhere?
Community, as you walk out of that community, the large group room,
Yes.
and turn left, it's
Yes.
right on that corner,
Okay,
right there.
okay.
Needs a little sprucing.
It
up
needs,
for sure.
it needs some sprucing up, absolutely. Like I said, I know the students will be thrilled
Oh, yeah, it
about
looks
getting rid of
great.
those wooden benches
It looks
that are
wonderful.
currently in there,
Yes, yes.
They served well for 50 years.
that have served us well, absolutely.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. And when would the purchases be available to be placed into the buildings? By next fall, or?
That's the plan.
That's the
The
plan.
Career Center is being renovated this summer, but we'll order it and store it over the summer
And have it ready for
and
the
have it
fall?
ready for the start of the school year.
Wonderful,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Okay, no action on this, right? This is just an update for us?
We should vote on it
No,
forward
we
for
have to vote.
recommendation for
Oh, are we
purchase
doing
next
on
week.
this one?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm getting these all backwards. Okay. Okay, so we're voting on this on May 7th.
Yes, we are.
And
Okay.
we'll have two separate motions, one for LCTC and then one for.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Wilbur.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
work with the school.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, that concludes building and site.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. That'll take us to item 4, Finance Committee, Mrs. Bonnefield.
Thank you. We have 2 items tonight. The first one we're going to talk about is the Wayne Resa budget, and that is going to be Mrs. Smith.
Well, thank you very much. Hopefully, by now you all have a copy of the Wayne Resa budget. In looking at it, there are no really significant changes from their last budget. Before you are 8 different funds, kind of similar to how we keep different funds for different programs. They do the same. The two things that stood out to me were the general fund. I'm happy to report that they're continuing to maintain a very healthy fund balance. That means they're going to be able to continue their current programs and offerings. Their general fund proposed fund balance will be 60%, so very healthy. So, the other item of note was their Act 18 funds. We were watching that closely. For the last few years, they've made a one-time distribution out of the Act 18 fund to help the local districts support their transportation costs for the special ed students. And the fund balance in the Act 18 program is 117%. So I'm feeling pretty confident that they're going to once again do that one-time payment for us. So that's something that we'll include in our budget. So it's wonderful to see that level of stability there. Those Act 18 funds are what support the special ed students here in Wayne County. There's a millage that's levied and collected countywide. So here in our district, we are operating 4 different programs. So again, seeing such a healthy budget means that we're going to be able to continue to offer those services to our students. So in general, it looks very much the budget on par with what we've seen in prior years. And again, those were the 2 things on my radar that I wanted to keep a close eye and share with you, the board.
Any questions? Mrs. Burton?
Do we need to put in a formal request for the same funding, that transfer of funds that we have received over the last couple of years? And if we don't, if we don't have to, should we, can we? I don't want to just assume or hope it's going to come. I would like for us to take some action to actually request it.
Yep. We don't need to make a formal request, but that's something through the Wayne County business officials. We meet on a regular basis every month, and the finance manager from Wayne Resa is there, and so that's something that we're ongoing, having a conversation with them, checking in on if they're expecting to do that, and that'll definitely be a request that we make to them, and I know the superintendents will be discussing that at their superintendent's meeting. So although nothing formal is required from districts, that's definitely going to be something that's going to be talked about throughout the year. So,
okay. Can you remind me again the ballpark figure that we received from Resa?
Yep, about $760,000, I believe it was.
Okay.
This year.
Okay.
So just shy of $800,000 for the last 3 years.
And I'm thrilled that they have the fund balance that they have. However, when districts are still in the financial situations that we all are in, what is the logic behind having a 60% fund balance when we could be seeing more distribution to the districts?
Mm-hmm. I know for their the Act 18 program, those are restricted funds and how they're used, and that's been something they've been concerned over the last several years, and they're watching those closely, and I know they've scaled back on some of the programs. They've made the criteria to get into the Act 18 program harder. So now that we're seeing this stability come, I think this would be a time for us to go back to the ISD and have discussions between the Student Services Department, the superintendents, and the districts to look at maybe expanding the program again. So instead of making the distribution like with a special ed transportation payment, I think it makes sense to maybe to look at those expanded programs, because if you think about it, our Lavonia transition program that is doing so fantastic, that's a result of those cuts that they made to the Act 18 program, or I should say the tightening of the restrictions to get into the program. And they were being very responsible in doing that, because if they didn't make cuts, if they continued down the road incurring the costs that they were incurring and getting the levies in that they were getting, they were looking at chargebacks to the district. So right now, we as a district don't have to pay anything for our students to go to another district to one of their programs, but they were saying, if we continue down this road, we're going to have to start collecting the money from the districts. And so they did make these tweaks to the program, and they've done it so well that now they have this rather large fund balance. So that's something that will, if they do look at those programs, that's something that's going to help our general fund at the end, because right now the Livonia Transition Program is completely picked up by our general fund, and we've expanded it, and we do have students coming to us from other districts, and we're able to get some revenue that way to support the program. But it would be lovely to see something like that become a countywide program again, open it up to all the students in Wayne County. And then again, that would be an expense coming off of our general fund. So I think that's the direction I see it going if they're expecting their fund balance to maintain the way what it currently is. And I know their budgets for 18-19, we've just gone through the Act 18 budget approval process where we go through and we make our requests to them, what kind of staffing we'd like and what kind of resources we'd like to purchase for the year. So those approvals have been have taken place for the 18-19 school year. So I don't see any program shifts for 18-19, but those are things that potentially we might see for the 19-20 school year. So it gives us time to start those dialogues this coming year.
And I just want to make sure that what Ms. Smith mentioned at the beginning about now that we've had an opportunity to review the budget and to see where the fund balance is in the Act 18 fund, one of the things that we've talked about, and we've continued to work very hard, as did our predecessors, to work as hard as possible when we present the proposed budget in June for the following year, to be as accurate as possible with regard to not only our expenditures, but our revenue. And we had been reticent in the past 2 years,
Right.
after that first year of receiving that one-time payment, to include that as part of the budget, proposed budget in June that we present to the board. However, we've had some internal dialogue and feel relatively confident based on the past 3 years, current conversation that we've had on this topic, and looking at the fund balance and the proposed expenditures from the county, that there is, in all likelihood, a good projection that those monies would come toward the districts once again. So we will be bringing to you in our proposed budget in June this as a portion of the revenue for the year. Now, if that doesn't come to fruition, we certainly have 2 amendments that will take place, and if we need to amend the budget at that time to reflect that we did not receive that revenue, we certainly can, and we know we have a fund balance that would be able to accommodate that. However, that's a pretty large bump in our revenue, that if we anticipate we're going to be getting that, we would really like to start with that from the get-go, if that resonates with you and makes sense as well. So that's, once we had an opportunity to see where the fund balance was, and knowing where we've been the past 3 years, and knowing that the budgets have already been approved for 18-19 for each of the local districts, we feel relatively confident in including that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that piece, but we'd really like to try to get us as close as possible from the get-go, as opposed to making that amendment mid-year. So your thoughts on that?
Mrs. Burton?
I am fine with going ahead and putting that in our budget based on the information that you just presented. That it's becoming a bit historical, and by everything that you're seeing in their budget right now, it looks like they are planning on that. And I'm hearing from internal conversations that you're feeling relatively safe that we can go ahead and plan on that coming into.
Yes, and we are also not working with a fund balance in our district that is so precarious that if we did not have that revenue, that would put us in peril. And so we also feel confident that we would be able to withstand that if it were, for instance, $50,000 less, or a different amount, or perhaps we didn't receive it for some reason. But this allows us then to be as accurate as possible from the get-go.
Mrs. Frank?
You can just
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Just my last comment. I would like to see us engage in conversation with Resa about that the fund balance, the second topic that I wanted to broach. That is, I'm thrilled to see that they have a healthy fund balance, but it's extremely healthy. I would like to see us engage in whatever conversations are necessary to see what that can be used for in order to support the local districts, because that is what Resa is there for, is to support our local districts. And whether the conversations would be had with our administration and Resa folks, whether or not you would suggest at any time the board engage in conversations with Resa folks, I would be interested in taking direction from you on that. But to be sitting on a 60% fund balance and to be doing that over at least a period of years, I'm interested in seeing more support to local districts from Resa. So,
We would be happy to express that on behalf of the district.
okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Frey. Actually, it ties in exactly what Mrs. Burton was saying. I also would like to see us do that. We just were at a Resa board meeting where we got an honor board recognition. But they also said, let us know what you want as a district, how we can serve you, and what we can do. And I think that that's a really healthy point to say, more services and more availability of the funds that have been allocated to them. I think even putting our district in a position of, are we going to include the 800? Are we not going to include the 800? When you have such a healthy fund balance, it should be included in their original budget so that we can plan on it or not plan on it. And I think as opposed to after 2 years in a row, knowing that they probably have it with such a healthy fund balance, I'd like to see it in their budget so that we are not making that decision, that it's already laid out in the budget clearly for us as you plan. The other thing I just thought was with our third grade reading bill that's coming up and all of the resources that we have to use. I mean, something like this kind of a fund balance would be so helpful for districts while we are putting more support services and that sort of thing.
Early literacy,
Right,
the lower levels.
right. I mean, some of our literacy coaches, if they could partner with districts on that, because every district is going to be facing that would be huge, a phenomenal way to use some of their budget. And again, if you would like us to contact them, we're happy to contact their board if that works better for you or whatever. And the other piece is just that they did support us in terms of that training that we all went to. I think we all took advantage of a portion of the cost of our training. But that would be also another phenomenal thing. I know it's a small portion to the district, the cost to the district in terms of board training, but I think when they partner with us and it just is more money of Livonia Public Schools going back to the students, and if Wayne Resa would help us more with those costs of making sure that we have up-to-date training, I think that would be a major use, yes, of their funds with such a healthy fund balance.
Mrs. Burton.
Actually, I was under the same impression that was Wayne Resa, and found out through conversation, Wayne Resa hosted it, but it was actually Wayne County Association of School Boards that offset our cost. So giving credit to both organizations, one hosted and one offset the cost of that, because they both do see the value in it.
Yeah.
But kudos to both organizations,
Yes.
and we would love to see that continue, because I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Educating school boards to do their work well is an enormous asset that they can bring to our entire county.
Right, absolutely.
I've made note of all those suggestions. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Mrs. Smith, on Monday at the meeting, if you would maybe just a short synopsis to let us know just what Resa is, what they do for us, why we have to vote on their budget, and just a little snippet during that program, just to make sure that when everybody's listening to our broadcast, that we understand what Wayne Resa is and the importance and how that ties in with our district.
That's a great suggestion.
Would be really helpful. Okay, and we will be voting on this on Monday, okay? And our second item
Thank you.
is...
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Mr. Francis is back with the most exciting topic of the evening. I'm so proud to say is on my agenda. We're working on the paper purchase for 2018-2019.
Good evening again. I have, and I believe in your packet you had the details on this year's paper purchase, which technically speaking would be for next year, for the 18-19 school year. Just for some background, I went and looked at the paper purchase from the past 2 years in comparison to this year. I believe I wrote the full number in my memo, but I was curious as to what was driving. They're not wildly different from year to year, but there are a few $1,000s differences at any given point. And what I looked at was from 2 years ago, which is just prior to when I started the position. I found the old document, and it looks like we actually, even though CPG has the Resa contract, we had bid our own that year. So we had a different company back for the 16-17 school year. And then we've used CPG through the bid, the Resa bid process the last 2 years. But their prices per case of items has increased, which is very likely part of their multi-year contract, because if you recall, they had the contract for several years. So long story short, the real driver, even though we purchase 11 by 17, 8.5 by 14, color, the real driver is the standard 8.5 by 11 white paper. And we've purchased approximately the same number of cases, the same
Every year.
each year. So it's not the same exact number, but we've bounced between 4,600 and 4,700, a lot of cases of paper. And with it only takes a couple dollar increase to change once you multiply it by, that many thousands of cases. So that's really been where the drivers come in. It's gone from 22.45, and it actually went down a little bit to 21.38, and now it's up again to 24.47 for next year. So that's really the number. It's the 8.5 by 11 white paper that's changing the amounts. But as you can see, overall, we're talking about within a range of a few $1,000s from year to year. So just, I guess, fun facts.
Okay, Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Mr. Francis, have you noticed any change in the consumption of paper with the new printing machines and the new presses?
So we haven't, I don't know that we've had them long enough to be able to get a good track on that number, because it came in, it came in this year, but it also came in during, getting at the end of last year, and sort of some of the buildings were getting used to it. We're ordering fairly similarly, other than like the larger pieces. The 8.5 by 11s we're continuing to order, and since it's something, we're being conservative because paper won't go bad necessarily, so we can hold it until we have a firmer feel on whether we are lowering our consumption. What I do see is ordering less of the larger sizes, the 8.5 by 14s, the 11 by 17s. And maybe that's just happenstance one year. I don't want to draw a conclusion on those copiers. So right now we're kind of holding steady with our number, and then we'll take a little bit better look on a year-over-year basis after we do another year worth of purchase. Just in case. I mean, that's the nice thing. The paper can be kept safe and used again. It won't spoil, so to speak. Yeah. But it is. I've actually become quite used to the secure print, and I think many of my colleagues have as well. I really like it to be able to do it. I'll rifle off several items, and then knowingly later on in the day just go hit it at one time and print my items. And I've oftentimes accidentally printed something in color, but didn't actually print it. I sent it as a color and went, oh, shoot. You can go up to it, and when you log in, you can delete a specific line item job, and then I can get it to print in black and white what I want, or vice versa. So it's been a pretty good, so far at least, on one person's opinion, the secure print's been pretty good. And we'll keep an eye on that paper use, too.
Okay. Anybody else have exciting questions for our exciting? Okay.
Trying to spruce it up a little bit.
Okay, we'll vote on that.
This, please, for the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. And
Have a
that
nice night.
concludes finance.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. That'll take us to item 5, Curriculum Committee. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Johnson. We have 3 items on the Curriculum Committee agenda tonight. The first is the cooperative agreement for the Lavonia Transition Program with Dr. Terrio.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is my honor every year to present to you the Livonia Transition Program Cooperative Agreements. As you know, the Livonia Transition Program addresses the vocational needs of our students 18 to 26 with disabilities. It is located at Schoolcraft College and has been located there for the past 3 years. Beth Santer, coordinator, and our staff, Kathy Burr, Dawn Cannell, Kim Fortner, and Jennifer Scribolo, provide quality programming for all of our students. Not only for our Lavonia students, but also we have cooperative agreements with Northville, Redford Union, Crestwood, South Redford, and adding Garden City for the 2018-2019 school year. We charge the resident district a flat fee, and the resident district receives the state aid for their students. So just a little background on the Livonia Transition Program, that we continue to work on building our base of local businesses that support our students. We have students currently working at Schoolcraft, Goodwill, Cintas, Brookdale, Brighton Gardens, Starfish, Idlewild, Mod Pizza, and Midwest Dental Supply. We also, as you know, have a Project Search site located at Embassy Suites. Our students learn a variety of jobs ranging from custodial, office and clerical support, landscaping, food preparation, and interaction and support for our young students as well as our elderly. For our current enrollment, we have 5 students who exited the program early because they received full-time competitive employment, which is the goal of our program, as well as 9 students at our Project Search site currently have jobs lined up at the end of the year when they exit our program. I would like to place this on the consent agenda at the next board meeting, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Looking around for who's leading this group. Thank you.
We're rudderless.
We share a lot of responsibilities. We all learned a great deal about the Project Search. I think that was probably the most moving presentation that we have had in my 9 or 10 years on the school board. It's absolutely a fabulous program. How does that differ from the other businesses that you mentioned in our memo in terms of offering employment? I'm assuming that the Project Search is more geared toward getting these kids into a full-time position if possible.
Correct. We have an opportunity to interview the students to place them into the Project Search site. We work with Michigan Rehabilitative Services and the state on this project as well. The state provides us with 2 job coaches on site at the cost of the state. And we work with that job site to exit the students after 1 year. So this is a last year for the majority of our students, where we are solely focused on training within 5 to 6 areas within the business. The business has to be large enough to support a small group of students, but it also has to have a wide enough range of jobs that our students can learn for potential employment. So some of our students will be employed at Embassy Suites, and then some have received jobs elsewhere because of the skills taught on the Project Search job site. But for both the Livonia Transition Program as well as Project Search, our ultimate goal is competitive employment.
Okay.
So we do, the coaching is a big piece of that we receive the funding for those folks to be on site with our students and
Okay.
on site.
Okay, great, thank you. And thank you and your whole staff for all the work that goes into putting this program together. I know there were some parents that advocated for this for several years, and you can't just create this in 6 months. This is an enormous undertaking. But thank you so much, because what a gift to so many of these students, obviously from so many communities that utilize these services. But it takes an enormous amount of work and a great passion to do this.
Absolutely.
So thank you to you and your whole department for continuing to offer it.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
and as our Project Search site students would say, my pleasure.
Yes.
Any other questions? Mrs. Frank?
Just a number, about a total number of students that are in the program?
52.
Okay.
And this really ties into what Mrs. Smith was talking about. It was partially an outgrowth of the change in eligibility criteria to be part of the Western Wayne Skills Center program. And when students were no longer eligible for that programming, what other options, would be available. And so initially it was at the Western Wayne Skills Center, and Dr. Terrio was instrumental in creating that program, and then eventually moving it over to Schoolcraft. And so that became a program that Lavonia created and funded under the leadership of Dr. Terrio and her team.
Other questions or comments?
Are we okay with that being on the consent agenda?
For sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And
this is from
one
general
additional
fund.
comment, I do
Is that
have
right? It comes
a,
out of not special, correct, general fund.
I have a young friend who's part of the transition program, and his family is very supportive, but I cannot tell you how seriously he takes his work. He is so proud of the work he does there, and and just the changes in him, to see him have that ownership is spectacular.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one other comment. Thanks to our friends and neighbors at Schoolcraft for carving out space and seeing the importance of this for these students. But they deserve a thank you also.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the curriculum agenda is the cooperative agreement for the Livonia Career and Technical Center, and we'll invite Mr. Willenborg to address us.
She has more pictures.
Next up.
Next.
Oh, you are right in the room.
Again, thank you. I'd like to continue our initial discussion from last week's study session regarding renewing our cooperative agreement that are currently in place between the Livonia Career Technical Center and surrounding districts that send their students to our facility. Those non-LPS students attend classes at the LPS Career Center primarily because those vocational and technical opportunities do not exist in their home districts. LPS students have the first opportunity for seats and spots for another school's district students are offered only after LPS students are accounted for. While the student's resident district receives the state pupil funding for their students twice a year, LPS will invoice those sending districts for an amount equivalent to a fractional FTE of the student's schedule at the Livonia Career Technical Center, which in most cases is a third of their FTE, the 2 out of 6 hours essentially. Last school year, this cooperative agreement resulted in almost $400,000 of additional funding for the Livonia Public Schools. Students from other districts are subject to LPS rules and regulations. LPS does not provide transportation for these students, and any special education services remain the responsibility of the sending district. In your packet, you have a sample contract that we send to each resident district for their Board of Education approval. As part of this discussion, this agreement also includes an agreement with the Wayne Westland Community Schools, to send LPS students to the William Ford Career and Technical Center. Currently, we have no students attending classes at their career center. I recommend that we extend cooperative agreements for the 2018-19 school year with Northfield Public Schools, the Plymouth Canton Community Schools, the Redford Union Schools, Crestwood Public Schools, Wayne Westland Community Schools, and Canton Preparatory High School. I'd like to place this item on the consent agenda for the next board meeting.
Questions or comments?
No.
President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Willenborg, you said we do not provide transportation for these students. How do they get to?
They would either drive on their own or bus their students to our career center.
Okay, so the other districts could provide the
Yes.
busing themselves.
If that's what they choose to do.
Okay.
And then we provide the busing for our own students
right.
within the high schools.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Burton.
I think that the $400,000 is significant, seeing as this is literally filling in gaps in that class, that those seats would go empty, because, as you said, the Lavonia students get the first dibs at these seats. And these are basically leftover seats. So to be able to bring in $400,000 to continue to offer that program to Livonia Public School students, I think it's just a win-win for everybody.
Certainly enriches the program, absolutely.
Yes.
The opportunities and the staffing and the program.
Mrs. Frank.
I know we talked about this, Mr. Willenberg, or it just came up in passing about several classes being full, that they actually have to turn people away. There is not any plans as of right now to expand any of the classes. Is that correct?
Well, it's analyzed every year.
Okay.
I believe Northville is our biggest attendant. 90% of the students that are sending from ascending district are from Northville. Some of those students may be turned away.
Okay.
But we'll always consider, what if we added another section of that? But if that teacher has a full schedule, you can't do that. So, we try to help them out because it helps us out. But there comes a time where, not everything will fit nice and neatly.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Willenberg.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis.
Are you okay with consent agenda?
Yes, consent agenda is fine with me.
And the final item on the curriculum committee is the textbook adoptions for world languages with Mr. Willenberg. You may retain your seat.
I'm going to stay up here and I'll welcome,
We have a guest.
I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Matt Miga. Those that work with Mr. Miga also know him as Mr. Upbeat, Mr. Positive Spirit, Mr. Friendly, as a person of energy, effervescent personality, if you will. But we're here to talk to him about his role as the world language teacher leader. He has been working throughout the school year with a team of world language teachers to evaluate their curriculum, research best practice, and create a vision for teaching and learning in the world languages. And evaluate new materials and selecting best choices with the funds that you've allocated towards new materials. So he's our go-to person. He speaks fluent Spanish, German, and French, almost, at least Spanish anyhow. But with that being said, I'll turn over to Mr. Miga.
Thank you, Mr. Willenberg. I'm here this evening to bring a recommendation to purchase high school world language textbooks for level 1 Spanish, French, and German. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the process we went through and then share each textbook recommendation. As you know, our district has specific requirements for textbook adoptions as outlined in the administrative regulations of our board policies. The initial step in the process is to form a committee of teacher representatives. The committee began in the fall of 2017 when all world language teachers met together to review curriculum, research, and current best practices. After reading contemporary best practice research and second language acquisition research, the team developed its needs assessment summary. Next, the team developed a rubric to guide evaluation of texts. We evaluated the textbooks on 6 main categories: technology, thematic approach, supplemental ancillaries, appeal to students, cultural integration, and the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages 5 C's, which represent culture, communication, connections, comparisons, and community. Finally, languages broke off to explore the available texts and evaluate them using the developed rubric. The top 2 textbooks in each language were used in classrooms, evaluated by our students, and the recommended texts were approved by our administrators. For Level 1 German, we are recommending Portfolio Deutsch. It was published in 2015 and met 20 out of the 23 evaluation criteria. There was one book that was rated higher, Heniel Klick. Although German teachers felt that Heniel Klick met more criteria, the student feedback led the teachers to choose Portfolio Deutsch. Heniel Klick is entirely in German without any directions in English, and students commented that English directions are important in the first year of learning the language, especially when completing homework and finishing work outside of the school day, or when a substitute teacher may be required to teach the course. The committee concurred that Heniel Klick relied heavily on the skill of the classroom teacher and was not as supportive of language learners. Therefore, the committee felt that for that reason, Portfolio Deutsch was the best choice. The total cost for the Portfolio Deutsch textbook purchase would come to $35,675.75. This includes student books, an 8-year online license, teacher support materials, and complimentary assessment and online access for teachers. Funds for this purchase would come from the district's textbook budget. For Level 1 French, we are recommending Té Broché. It is currently being published, and we are recommending the 2019 version. The presentation in this book revolves around a central thematic question and has a conversational approach to presenting vocabulary and interactive activities that support each mode of communication integral to second language acquisition: interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive. This textbook also offers the exciting Passport program, which allows students to communicate immediately in the target language. It immerses students in culture and content and engages them in the language learning process. With Passport, students are able to access abundant practice materials, participate in realistic world situations to demonstrate their comprehension, explore authentic culture through articles, videos, and songs which are updated by the textbook company weekly, and demonstrate oral proficiency growth and performance through videos between the teachers and the students. Tébraché met all 23 of the evaluation criteria of the French group. The next closest text, D'accord, met 14 out of the 23 criteria. When students reviewed Tébraché and D'accord, more students did choose D'accord as their top choice. However, the committee felt that because the sample text had 1 year of content spread over 2 years, students chose it simply due to the simplicity and perceived lack of rigor. Afterwards, teachers found through verbal dialogue that the students were attracted to the simplicity of the D'accord text. The committee felt that this impacted the validity of student preference in D'accord, and it was determined that the best text to recommend for purchase is Tébraché. The total cost for the Tébraché textbook purchase would come to $59,718.96. This includes, again, student books, an 8-year online license to the textbook, and access to the Passport component. The teacher support and assessment materials are complimentary. Funds for this purchase would come from the district's textbook budget. For Level 1 Spanish, we are recommending Auténtico, which was published in 2018 by Pearson. Auténtico met almost all of the valuation criteria, as did another text, Entre Culturas, from Wayside Publishing. Teachers taught from both texts and shared both with students. The reviews were strong for both books. The committee got back together to discuss the student data, the teacher ratings, and the cost of both programs. Ultimately, the committee determined that the Auténtico met the same criteria as Entre Culturas, but the cost was significantly less. The committee's consensus was to go with Auténtico. The total cost for the Auténtico textbook purchase would come to $66,451.61. This includes, again, student books, teachers' editions, resource workbooks, and an 8-year online license. Other teacher support materials are also included complimentary. Funds for this purchase would come from the district's textbook budget. The cost for the 3 world language textbooks totals $161,846.32, with $69,324.64 in complimentary materials. The money has been budgeted in the secondary textbook budget. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Matt, could you just hold up those books for a second?
Sure, do you want me to pass them around for you guys to sort of browse through here?
Or maybe just tell us.
Okay,
This is
so, yep, this is the
Auténtico.
Auténtico, which is the Spanish text that's being recommended.
So the teacher and the student?
Yep, teacher and then student version. This is Portfolio Deutsch, which is the German one. This, I believe, is the teacher's manual. And then we have the student, and inside is a workbook that goes along with it. And then we have the teacher edition of Tébraché. This is still being literally published, so I believe we only have the teacher edition of this right now, which is exciting. The French teachers are super excited to get their hands on a brand new textbook.
I couldn't figure out what language that one was.
It's not English. Does anyone have any questions for Senor Miga?
Only if they're in Spanish. No.
No. Mrs. Garrett?
Yes, Mrs. Burton.
So with this textbook purchase, we're going to be receiving the actual physical books, and in addition to that, the 8-year online version.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically what we get is however many books that we order, just for simplicity's sake, we order 100 books, we'll have 100 online licenses, which then the next year can be handed out again so that they constantly are used for at least the 8 years.
For the 8 years.
But then
Okay.
once that 8 years is up, we do have the physical books.
Right, just in case our budget doesn't allow in that 9th year for
Of
replacing
course,
all of
of
the
course.
books. It's been known to happen.
Never.
And I ask this question mainly for the public's benefit every year.
We are asked periodically, why don't we just not go to a physical book and go to an online in order to save money? My understanding has always been, it's going to cost us the same. Whether we just went with an online version or a hardcover, one way or the other, depending on how the publisher presents it. Either you buy the hardcover and you get the online for free, or vice versa, but there's not an option to save money by only buying the online version.
You are correct as far as I'm aware.
Okay. Okay.
That is correct.
It's been the case with every other textbook purchase we've had, but I keep bringing it up because we're continually asked, and that's a legitimate question. But just because you can hop on the web for free does not mean that your textbook is free on the web.
And there's a thought, too, that not every home has that access to the internet.
Yes.
And this would make it more fair and equitable
Yes.
that they have a physical book.
And there are different learning styles also.
Sure.
I mean, there are times when it's advantageous to hop online and look at something, but there's also those of us who would like to actually hold a physical book, and just like we teach to different learning styles, this would also encompass different learning styles, I believe. So I'm glad to hear that we're able to utilize both. I also wanted to give you kudos. Thank you for utilizing our student feedback and doing so with a grain of salt. I was happy to hear that in one case, the student feedback caused us to make a different decision. And frankly, being a singularly English speaker, I don't blame these kids. If you gave me a book that was entirely in German, I would have a heck of a time. But utilizing that student feedback and realizing that even though something else may have hit, the same or a few higher criteria, if the student feedback was legitimate, that another book was a better resource, thank you for using that information and changing our decision. At the same time, and as I was reading this, getting ready for this meeting, I kind of chuckled when I heard the same point that you brought out in the meeting just a few minutes ago, that in another case, the student feedback was not necessarily what we went with, because it was going to be to choose something that was a little bit less rigorous. So thank you for legitimately using this information, these tools in the classroom, and gathering that information from not only our staff but also our students.
You're welcome, and the team definitely appreciates it as well, to have that opportunity to get the students to get their feet wet in what could become part of their lives. So.
Yep. My other question, it was mentioned in here that it's beneficial to have a series that we can continue on with, and yet we're purchasing level 1. What's the thought with level 2, 3, et cetera?
Exactly. So we basically, when this process was started, we were told level 1 is where we'd start. Next school year, we would be coming with a level 2 adoption, and then in 2 school years, we would do level 3, 4, 5, basically the upper levels.
Okay.
The teams have been working and looking at the whole series, even though it's level 1 that we're sort of bringing to you today. And the hope is that with all the languages, we can continue on with a series in some way, shape, or form. It may be adapted to meet like half a book this year, so that we can actually cover the content in an accurate way and delve into material instead of sort of toss it out there and hope for the best versus actually going into in-depth with the students. So you'll probably be seeing me, I know you'll be seeing me again next year, and then the following year as well. There had been some talk with the team, and we'd been approached, do we want to come now with a purchase for this school year and then in the following school year, but we wanted to make sure that teachers had time to start with the new curriculum before they were bombarded with possibly 2, because most of our French and German teachers teach levels 1 through 5 in the course of one day. So to throw even 2 new preps at them on top of the other 3 that they're dealing with, and many of them have split courses, could be drastic, and the students could be affected by that. So this is the sort of the slow, graceful approach in order to incorporate the curriculum and allow the students the best ability to incorporate themselves into what the curriculum is asking for.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to your committee that does all this legwork.
Great team.
Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I was going to say. Thank you so much for your thoroughness in explaining all of the how you went along in the process. It was excellent, well thought out, and in addition, the group that you worked with, I know it takes a lot of time and effort to go ahead and try to bring these books to fruition and to test them out, and it takes a lot of time. So thank you so much to the committee. It sounds like they garnered a lot of information that was very useful, and they included students also in their input. So to me, this is a great opportunity for our first language students to benefit from, and I do hope that it will move on smoothly for you into the subsequent years. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Elquist.
Thank you. So just a couple of comments. You would not be surprised to know that Mr. Miga is also one of our Galileo leaders. And so
Not a surprise.
represents us very well in that regard, and hopefully has been a great professional development for you as well. I wanted to mention that you may recall one of the first policies that Mrs. O'Brien undertook revising was the textbook adoption policy, because thanks to the Wayne County Enhancement Millage, we were able to set aside dollars each of the next 3 years for the very important textbook replacement cycle that we so desperately needed. And the board was very willing to have us begin that process. It is an extensive process, and as we shared with you at the study session, we had anticipated bringing even more recommendations this school year, but it is a lengthy process, as Mr. Miga shared with you, and as you saw in the memos from Mrs. O'Brien and Mr. Miga and the committee. The textbook adoption process, as outlined by the Board of Education, is rightfully rigorous and thorough. And we do that because this is not something a process on which we embark every few years. We keep these books for many, many years. So it's important to have the voice of the user, the value of our teacher expertise, as they come into this process, and to have multiple teachers involved, to have pilot periods, to have our students give feedback, to have our principals and our cabinet members be able to review this. So it is an extensive and thorough process, and sometimes takes even a little longer. And so I know in some cases, folks were hoping we'd have some additional recommendations for next year. And part of that really emanates out of the committee's work. Sometimes they'll say, we would like to have an additional card marking or additional period of piloting these particular books, or we're not ready for that time, because as Mr. Miga mentioned, it's extensive professional development and new learning for the teachers to get into a new teacher edition, to get into the new student edition, and to be able to begin to access all of the online resources, which are tremendous. Some of the ancillary materials for these programs really are excellent for our learners. Whether it's a workbook, like you saw, I believe, in the German book, or you may have the online materials. We want to be sure that our teachers have had an opportunity to thoroughly review all of those. And so, once again, on so many fronts, we're grateful for the Wayne County Enhancement Millage. This has allowed us to move forward on that replacement cycle that we shared with you last year. And you will continue to see these adoptions come forward over the next few years, thanks to those dollars, and thanks to our staff and the leadership of our staff who have worked so hard on these teams. So we have many, many textbook adoption groups going right now. So we thank the Academic Services Department for their leadership and work in that, and for all of our teachers who have spent time giving us really valuable input in each of those areas.
Yeah, it's Mr. Willenberg.
I just also would be remiss if I didn't recognize Ms. O'Brien in her hard work and the critical role she's played in this process. So
Duly noted.
Matt's been a superstar. Ms. O'Brien's been guiding him.
Yes. And the team is very grateful to the board and the district for allowing the release time for us to be able to do this and explore this opportunity.
Excellent, that's great.
We should ask Matt a really hard question.
Well, you have to, because I told him before the
I
meeting
know.
that we were going to grill him.
Exactly. So
So you guys are
got the
on
really
really
hard
easy.
question. Mine. She'll tell you the really hard one. I just wanted to get your explanation of the 2015 for the German book. If the community says, why did you purchase an older book? Language doesn't change, is that what I assume the answer is going to be, but your thoughts?
It's not only that. So, as you may or may not be aware, world language textbook options actually are quite limited, which is part of it. Actually, the Germans were our German teachers were very creative in looking and thinking outside the box. They're not going. It's a textbook publisher, but it's a textbook publisher actually based out of Europe. We have resources here in the U.S., so it's not like we'll be paying international shipping or anything like that. So they were able to look at that, and that's part of it, is that I think they They only had like 4 books, 2 of them stateside based. And it was a matter of, as that professional development, delving into the books, what's the rigor of it, talking with their colleagues at other districts who might be using those other books and saying, are you guys really happy with this or whatnot? So it's a great point to bring up that it is seeing in 2015, but of the materials that we were able to see, get our hands on, delve into, it was the strongest, both of those 2 texts, and then taking into consideration the student feedback was the best bet for them. The teachers are those teachers are super excited to be able to get into that textbook. It's a great update for the programs that we currently offer.
Thank
That was
you.
a tough question.
Was it a tough question?
I thought so.
Then she's done.
Yes, no further questions for me. Any other questions or comments?
Do we anticipate we'd have any difficulty getting these in for use in the fall?
Not in the fall. In fact, I've been trying to talk with the textbook publishers to at least be able to get, once we have board approval, try and get actual teacher materials.
To take home.
So they can either get online
yes.
or in print or whatnot, so that we can get some, they can start dabbling with them over the summer.
That'd be
If
great.
not, possibly get them in for training over the summer as well, so that we can get them ready and raring to go for
That
the
would be
fall.
great.
And we're voting on this on Monday.
Yes, please, on the regular agenda.
Order them on Tuesday.
We won't complain about that.
Choose
sounds like a
from
good
Bajo
plan.
es muy bueno, is that right?
Yeah,
Yes, very well done.
Thank you, LPS. Spanish 1 and 2.
The rest of us have no idea what you just said, but we
Apparently, they're
sounded
still
yeah.
using Dan's books right now.
I said Neely Bain.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks for sticking with us through the meeting.
Thank you.
And President Johnson, that wraps up the curriculum committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. Then that will take us to item 6, policy, and it's Mrs. Burton.
Thank you, and we will welcome Dr. Terrell back to go over some board policies.
Thank you, Vice President Burton. The first board policy brought to you this evening is students' suicidal behavior, which sets forth our planned actions when students express suicidal ideation or suicidal behavior. The policy, as well as administrative procedures, have been reviewed and remain the same. The exhibit that followed this policy regarding reporting of information such as physical assault, criminal sexual conduct, and child abuse and neglect is listed under the policy, students suspected child abuse and neglect. I submit this policy as reviewed. So no changes to the policy or administrative procedures.
Questions or comments on this? Dr. Terry, I'm sorry, can you refresh our memory from when we talked about this in the study session? The location of this exhibit has moved, correct?
Correct. It is under suspected child abuse and neglect, the policy for suspected child abuse and neglect.
So we are moving the exhibit to this section?
That is correct.
Okay, but we're not changing any of the content?
That is correct.
And is it also staying in that other section as a duplicate exhibit? Does it apply to both sections then, or is it simply, it's actually cut and paste?
Yep, it's moving that exhibit to the suspected child abuse and neglect because it is talking about items that need to be reported. And the items that needed to be reported were, as listed, physical assault, criminal sexual conduct, and child abuse and neglect. So we thought it was much more relevant to have it under that board policy.
Okay, so we're cutting it and moving it over
Correct.
to this section. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this?
No, we're taking no action.
So we are taking no action on this, so this can simply go to Mrs. Wozniak then to change the date, just to put, noting the review date, but we won't need to further this since we are not changing anything in the board policy.
That is correct.
Alrighty, and then our next.
Yep, the second policy, student immunizations, states immunization of students shall be required and reported in accordance with state law. We removed the word inoculations. The administrative procedures were updated to reflect the correct State School Aid Act, Public Health Code, and school codes regarding immunization requirements and deadlines. I would like this policy to be placed at a future board meeting for a first reading for your consideration.
Questions or comments on this policy? And there's, the administrative procedures can go ahead and get changed because that's just for board information. It's only the policy itself, board policy JGCB, that would need to go for a first reading.
Correct.
is everyone all right with taking this for first reading next week? Mrs. Frank?
Yes, to take it to a first. I just have a question about the immunizations, and I wasn't at the study session, so you might have gone over this. So currently, in order to get into LPS, you have to be immunized or sign a waiver. Is that correct? Or no, you have to get your immunizations?
You have to have your immunization record up to date, or you need to go to Wayne County Resa to have an educational session with one of their nurses down there regarding immunizations in order for them to sign off.
Okay. And is that board policy, or is that administrative policy, or that state law?
That's state law.
Okay. Okay. And is this being addressed by other districts? Because I know that as immunizations are getting, the debate is getting higher, are districts continuing to keep the same policy? Other districts continuing to keep the same policy? Or where do we stand with other districts? Do you know? What?
Well, I know some of the districts that send their students to us, that they have similar board policy because this is school code.
Okay.
So they follow similar policy, if not something exactly the same as ours.
Okay.
They have the same reporting requirements that we do.
And the decision it previously was that you could just simply sign a waiver in the office.
Yes.
And not choose to have your child immunized. The state determined that parents would need to go through some type of education process, and that was facilitated through each county's health department.
Okay.
And so they have either periodic times when people can come down, or you need to make an appointment. There are timelines during the year, and we've shared that previously. I believe with the board, there are timelines by which our district is required to have a certain number of students reported as immunized or have a waiver on record. And then by another point in time, it's considered an exclusion period for students.
Okay.
So we are required then to exclude them based on our policy and based on guidelines in the law regarding if students do not have either their immunizations up to date or the waiver signed after the educational session at the county, they would need to be excluded from school.
Okay. For 6 weeks, another question, sorry. So if somebody in a classroom has chickenpox, then anybody who is not immunized cannot come to school for a period of time in that school district, according to board policy, according to state law, or according to administrative procedures. Is that true?
That would be based on the health department.
Okay.
We follow health department guidelines when it comes to outbreaks such as chickenpox in classrooms, so we would follow their guidance.
Okay.
They have a guidance document that Dr. Terriel is responsible for sharing with our schools and then monitoring if schools come to us. And they have a clear guideline with regard to this is an exclusion period of 24 hours, or this is an exclusion period of
after an outbreak.
Et cetera. And it really varies from pink eye, strep throat, head lice.
Okay.
And some are simply guideposts, and some are requirements.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mrs. Bonnefield?
Do we know approximately what the percentage of our non-vaccinated kids are?
I can find that out for you. We have that information. I don't have that with me tonight, but I can provide that for you.
It is small. I mean, it's not a large percentage for you guys.
Probably varies by inoculation, too.
Other questions or comments on this? All right, is everyone all right going to first reading on this policy as it's written right now? I mean, it's the revisions. Okay, Mrs. Bonnefield, would you put this on for first reading at our next meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, the administrative procedures can be taken care of right away because that does not require board action. And the, Mrs. Opus, the exhibit did not change on this, correct?
It did not.
Okay, so we're all set with that. And that takes care of board, policy. We're all set with that committee, Mr. President Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. That takes us to item 7, Legislative Committee. Mrs. Bradford, do you have anything?
I do not. Mrs. O'Quist, do you have anything to share this evening?
This evening.
Okay, thank you. Then we're all set?
Very good. That'll take us to item 8, Personnel Committee. Mrs. Frank, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Mrs. O'Quist, anything to add?
We do not.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
So I have a question. Do you guys want to put the paper purchase on consent agenda and spare poor Mr. Francis from having to come up again? Or we want to leave that on the, we want to leave that on the regular agenda?
I'm okay with it going on consent agenda.
I'm good with consent. I
Consent.
mean,
That's fine.
Okay.
we do it every year.
Okay.
And it is part of the county bid, so it's.
Okay, and the other one is, I know I asked Mrs. Smith to maybe talk a little bit about Resa. Do we want to put the Resa on the consent agenda, or do we want that to be a regular item?
I think
We have to
regular
vote
item.
on that, I believe.
We do have to
think we
vote,
do.
but we could put it on the consent agenda.
I think
I
regular.
If we're going
think
to-
regular.
I think regular.
I would agree.
Yeah.
If we're going to have comments on
That way we
it,
can
Yeah.
comment.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other business before the board tonight?
No, it's just, I will mention, I think the board knows this, but because we had a number of communication items deferred from April until May, and then we had a few already planned, we do have a lengthy opening portion of our meeting on Monday evening. It should be outstanding, but we do have many more communication items than normal, and so any of our regular viewers, just so you know,
Get ready.
Bring your
the
sleeping
Make
first
some
portion of the
popcorn.
meeting will
Pop some
be
popcorn.
many of our points of pride and acknowledgments of a number of award winners, et cetera, and then we'll move into the regular business of our meeting.
excellent.
All right, very good.
So we should bring our sleeping bags.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes.
All right, with that, then we are concluded for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.